Now we have our first player on the screen, a fan favorite, Eloise. She's obviously from Temple Storm, and those characters mean that she's from China. That's the original. Is it your home country is the first line there, and these are her decks. Looks like it. So she's going to be playing Druid, Rogue, and Warlock for us today, and looks like it's complete one of Reno deck for her Warlock. For her Rogue, it's going to be looking like a standard Oil Rogue with BGH. A lot of Chinese players love to put BGH in their Oil Rogue decks, and lastly the Druid, which seems like a pretty standard combo Druid with Sylvanas in there.
Yeah, pretty much these days, BGH is pretty common in Rogue because it counters Secret Paladin. Or it's kind of weird because Secret Paladin only has Dr. Boom in it, but it also has Mysterious Challenger, which very often gets buffed up to 7 attack. Otherwise, your best option against the Mysterious Challenger is just to sap it, and that probably isn't very good if your opponent is running more than one copy or one set of secrets. In Eloise's Reno Warlock deck, I'm trying to point out some interesting cards. The one that's most interesting to me is Spellbreaker. So it's clear that she prioritizes getting 2 silences in her deck, and that's something I haven't really seen in a lot of other Reno type decks, and definitely an interesting choice. Do you know what the 5 mana card is?
There's Fugan and Stalog in there.
Okay, right.
So yeah. Kind of tough for Monk to see the screen. He's screen sharing off of me so that we get our things all synced together. So yeah, Fugan and Stalog. I mean, as far as when I play against that ladder, especially when I was playing around with Grim Patron, that was something that was really tough for me to handle. And we do see that Fuoliver has Warrior in his lineup, so that could be a reality coming up, where maybe the Fugan and Stalog are able to push Eloise to victory because there's just too many threats for the Grim Patron Warrior to deal with.
Right. Fugan and Stalag is that set is kind of an innovation by Stan Cifka. He used Fugan and Stalag in his Reno Warlock deck to hit ranked number 1 legend on EU, and I believe he's been holding it for about a week or so. Mr. Yagut took it from him today, but he soon took it back within just a few hours. So very consistent play from Stan Cifka, and really nice innovation as well.
Yeah, definitely. Stan Cifka always bringing super interesting decks, always strange innovations, things that work all the time. I mean, the first tournament he won that put him on the map, I had to go against the very first game where Stan Cifka, in his first road to victory, I had to play against him, not knowing who this new kid was, and he brought out the Grim Patron, which wasn't very popular at the time, or was pretty new at the time, I should say. And some other decks, and it was that dream hack where you keep changing your decks every single round, and he certainly thrived in that atmosphere, and showing that he's still an extremely strong player, getting to the top of the rankings. But he's not going to be part of this tournament, unfortunately. Didn't get the invites, but Eloise and Trender did. Very excited to have them here. And just to recap for you, it's going to be Druid, Rogue, and Warlock for Eloise, and Mage, Warrior, and Priest for Fuoliver. Just to talk about Fuoliver right now while we get the chance, obviously we see him on the screen complaining about something. That is classic Fuoliver. Always is a very expressive person. He is on Team Yellow Miracle, as you can see on the screen there. And his accomplishments, are that he's won the NEL twice, and in a Zanki Invitational, he was able to win that as well, beating players such as Hyped, Gara, and Tiddler on the way. And one other thing he's done is brought 5 free-to-play accounts to Legend, so that's pretty cool as well. And right. We can see his decks on the screen. How about you talk us through these decks, Monk?
Sure. First deck is just a kind of classic Reno Freeze Mage, one that Super JJ really popularized by sweeping with it in the finals of Sea-Story Cup 4-0 against Sansifka. We keep coming back to him. The second deck seems to be a Control Warrior, and Fuoliver is also very known for playing Control Warrior. Not only is he known for playing Control Warrior, he's also known for being one of the first people to popularize Patron Warrior in the Chinese scene. So we're not really sure we wouldn't be sure of what kind of warrior he would be bringing, but he showed us, he thinks that Control Warrior is indeed the best. And the third deck, I didn't catch it. What was the third class?
Yeah, I didn't get to catch it. It was Priest, but I didn't get to catch
Priest.
Priest
yes, I think it was a Dragon Priest. I saw at least Light Bomb in it, but I didn't get to point out any of the interesting cards, any of the interesting tech choices that he put in. But we do know from yesterday that Blue, yet another Chinese player, brought a really strange Dragon Priest, because it seemed like the core of a Dragon Priest, but it had like 10 or so cards that you wouldn't normally see in a a Dragon Priest. I guess this is just the Chinese version with two jeweled scarabs, and Doctor Boom, I believe, was in it, and just a lot of cards that you don't really see. Do you remember any of the other variations that Blue put in his Dragon Priest?
Yeah, Chilma, just, Double Valence Chosen, the Thought Steal, just a lot of crazy
Right,
off the wall
right.
stuff in there.
Thought Steal, right. I just remember there being a lot of control elements in the deck as well. The Thought Steal really caught me off guard because it doesn't really seem like the kind of card that really goes well with Dragon Priest at all.
Yeah, I think the prevailing thought in China right now is that Priest is very weak. So it's kind of like Shaman. There's a lot of players experimenting with Shaman, putting different cards in there, trying to make it work. That's kind of the thought in China, that just Priest is weak. Both Dragon Priest and Control Priest are weak, so they're trying to innovate stuff, trying to put interesting things in the deck to make it work. Whereas in the West, it's a bit of a different thoughts or different feeling about Priest. A lot of people like the Dragon Priest, so not much tinkering to it, maybe a couple things here and there. Same goes for the Hunter, just by the way. They don't really like Hunter very much. They think it's a weak class, so they just kind of try to get by with Face Hunter and not try to go with any sort of mid-range Hunter or hybrid Hunter. I want to
Right.
keep talking about... sorry to cut you off. What were you going to say?
Oh yeah, just keep going.
All right, so Fuoliver, a lot of you guys might not know him, but he's one of the bigger players in China. So even though he qualified for this, and even he wasn't even invited to the qualify for this, he had to qualify twice to get to this point. And so it's kind of cool to see such a prominent player in China. I mean, he could have easily been an invite had this been, a Chinese tournament, not an East versus West type tournament. So it's really cool to see him here, kind of like Zoro yesterday. It kind of felt like it was three very well-known players and kind of one somewhat unknown player in blue. And today is kind of the same thing. We have Eloise, Surrender, and Fuoliver. Jaysha is a pretty good under-the-radar pro in China on Team Celestial, but it's just really cool to see, even when we have players that qualify, they're still very accomplished and very good players.
Right. Qualifying for Chinese tournaments is even harder than qualifying for Western tournaments. I know a lot of you watching the broadcast, you play in a lot of these Western qualifiers, but in China, there's way more people playing, so there's way fewer potential qualifier spots that you're playing for. China, for instance, has about half the world's population of Hearthstone players, so it's really just almost a crapshoot. Is one of the complaints I keep hearing from China in order to qualify for these huge tournaments.
Yeah, obviously very difficult. I mean, just scrolling through Douyu TV before we started the broadcast, just looking at some people streaming Hearthstone, and everyone who's streaming, basically they're in 5-digit legendary, playing against 5-digit legendary on the other side, and it's crazy. The numbers go off the screen. It's so big, so it's so ridiculous. In any case, we do have the combo druid against our priest here. And neither of us got a good look at the priest. It could still be either one. I mean, you could still see both of the Dark Cultist and even the Valence Chosen. You could see in either a Dragon Priest or Normal Priest. Looks like Eloise is not at the studio playing from her home. I'm not sure if Surrender is at the studio, but yeah, it looks like it's only Fuoliver who's there at the moment.
Right. From what we heard, Surrender will be at the studio, so that'll be pretty interesting. He definitely doesn't speak Chinese, but his English is pretty good, so I'm sure he'll have a pretty good time.
Yeah, just all you need is English, right? No, I'm just kidding. In any case, we do have the opening with that Northshire Cleric. Basically, Fuoliver probably throwing that out there just to discourage any sort of Darnassus play. And if that happens, he gets kind of a free-ish card instead of doing nothing on turn 2. And Eloise has a decision to make whether or not she wants to coin Darnassus, coin Wild Growth, or maybe just pass. What do you think you would do here?
The problem with the Darnassus obviously is that you give your opponent a card, but even if you do give your opponent a card, it just means that he won't be developing anything on turn 2. So it's actually not that bad of a play. The problem with that play is even if you coin out the Darnassus on turn 3, you'll either have to Hero Power or Wild Growth. Neither of these is really preferential. Like you don't really want to do either of them.
Yeah, on the other hand, if you do have the Darnassus out there and you use your Wild Growth, then you have, and Fuoliver does go for the draw cards route, then he's not doing anything else. He's not actually developing the board, and then you are
Right.
able to, then you're able to use your hero power, and then you have 4 mana the turn afterward, and you can get potentially first play with that Shredder. So doing all that calculus, I think Eloise finally started to realize, okay, if I do this, I'm probably gonna have a good situation. If he plays a 2-drop, then me playing this Darnassus doesn't really matter anyway, as far as giving my opponent cards. So interesting play in the end.
Yeah, and it's gonna work out actually. Their Naxos, I guess it's gonna trade against the Shrinkmeister.
Oh,
Oh,
interesting.
or Shire. Okay, so he's really valuing the card draw here. I guess this gives Eloise just a really nice minion to trade into the Shrinkmeister. He does she doesn't
Ooh,
really account for the Velen's Chosen though,
yeah, not anymore.
and that might punish her quite a bit.
So with that Azure Drake hitting the field or hitting the hand, excuse me, of Fuoliver, it's looking like it's going to be Dragon Priest. That's not a card, excuse me, that you typically put into a normal control priest. So Fuoliver going to be valuing getting that board control rather than just responding the entire game.
Right, and Fuoliver is gonna curve out really well here with Dark Cultist and Shadow
Powered Shield.
Powered Shield. And this is the kind of situation that Druid just has a hard time dealing with. Getting back on the board is not something that Druid typically excels at, unless Druid gets a Sylvanas. That's really the card that Priest struggle the most with out of any card in the game, which is why a lot of Priest players are really excited about Entomb coming out sometime this week.
Yeah, and Tomb will be an interesting card to look out for. Maybe Fatigue Priest coming into play as well. So for Oliver sitting there, obviously he was going to play the Powered Shield and the Dark Cultist there with his 5-mana play already determined, but he just wanted to kind of determine what he wanted to buff up. He went with the Dark Cultist. I don't really blame him considering that I mean, you kind of want 2 big minions, 2 healthy minions on the table, and even though Eloise swiped there, she's still falling behind in tempo.
Right, she's gonna have a hard time keeping up with all this tempo. Keep the Grove is not gonna do much, especially with going into Fuoliver's turn 6. So I think she's just gonna have to rely on just playing minions and hoping the opponent doesn't really have good ways to trade into these minions.
Unfortunately, Fuoliver has a decent trade here using that Blackwing Corruptor, and he can also develop the Twilight Whelp as well. Looks like he's favoring getting the health on the Azure Drake. Good sequencing there. And I imagine, we're going to see this Twilight Whelp. There's no reason to hold it back. Get it nice and buff 2-3 out there. It's like a zombie child that doesn't give your opponent health. It's pretty good.
Right, this board is, I would say, pretty good as well. And even a Shadow Word Death to deal with this Dr. Boom. Fuoliver's gained control of this game pretty early. And wow, yeah,
That
the
top
top deck, exactly. It seems like Dragon Priest players have been just top decking left and right in this tournament.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the point of the deck, right? You set up the deck so that you have a lot of good cards on curve, 1, 2, 3, 4, just to get those cards out there. They're really powerful. What do you think about just going all face here with Fuoliver and playing that Twilight Guardian?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a really good play. After all, Firebat, his advice to a lot of players who are starting Hearthstone is that you always want to set up lethal, and I think this does so quite well.
Yeah, it
Quite
went
well.
mostly face. Didn't the 2 damage doesn't really matter too much, and if he's gonna take damage on anything, he prefers it to be that Twilight Whelp. So overall, I think pretty good play by Fuoliver in a pretty dominating position. And no matter what Eloise does, I mean, just looking at Fuoliver's point of view, not even looking at Eloise's hand, Fuoliver's like, okay, I have the board. I can respond to maybe a Keeper with my Cabal. If he doesn't do anything like that, I can just play my Azure Drake. So Fuoliver's feeling great. As far as Eloise is concerned, what did she do here to stay alive?
I definitely have to like. There's no really way to kill off your piloted shredders for some amazing drop from those. So I guess you have to Ancient of Lore, but even if you Ancient of Lore, what can you get? Innervate, I guess, would be one of the cards, and
Yeah, she's going for the
I
heal,
guess
going
yeah.
for the guaranteed that I stay on live on board play, which is feels pretty bad.
Yeah.
Looks like on board there's 12 damage, so Fuoliver is 1 short. He can play this Azure Drake and even maybe the oh, that's 2 mana off lethal. Might just go face anyway. Yeah, definitely makes sense. Don't really need to do anything else. Can also either heal or play the Shrinkmeister. Might as well keep the Shrinkmeister just in case you need to take something later, like a Shredder. But this is looking all but over.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a Sylvanas, just a bit too late. Sylvanas is kind of like one of those tech cards that you almost put in just for Priest because it's so strong against that class. Priest doesn't really have any silences, But unfortunately, this is there's really no way to stop all this damage incoming. Mind control tech would have been great, but as we can see from the deck lists prior to this, Eloise did not run that card in her deck.
Yeah, I think this. I mean, obviously, this is an unfavored matchup for the Druid. We've seen Dragon Priest take this matchup a lot, as we see Eloise does concede. But I think this goes back to her decision to take out the Northshire Cleric. I mean, Dragon Priests honestly don't really care about that card too much. They're more focused on getting tempo, and it's kind of a bonus where they can. It's like a threat, right? Your opponent has to deal with it, and later on in the game, maybe you can sneak it in and draw a card if you're running low on cards. But for the most part, they want to get tempo, and the Northshire Cleric is there to be a one drop that you can Valence Chosen, and also just to be annoying for your opponent. Like, look, I can maybe draw cards at any point if you don't deal with this. But I feel like Eloise would have been better off on turn, I think it was 2, using their Darnassus to trade into the Shrinkmeister and then Wild Growthing. And then from there, you can start getting back the tempo by playing on curve that Paladin Shredder.
Yeah, there were so many options for Eloise. Another option yet would have been to skip her turn 1 and to just wild growth on turn 2 in order to curve out into Shredder and then Loatheb and then just a more stronger plays. It's just the problem with the problem with Druid versus Dragon Priest is that you really need that innervate or that really early wild growth early on, or you can't fight on curve because generally your minions on curve will be weaker than theirs.
Yeah, definitely. So now we have Druid versus Control Warrior, which is traditionally a good matchup for the Druid. However, recently Control Warrior has gotten a few more options as far as removing the Druid threats. I mean, typically it was just too hard to remove everything with the weapons, but now they have things like Bash, even that Fierce Monkey to kind of compete onto the board, and you know it just be able to remove all the Druid threats and not being in danger of dying. I mean, Justicar is also a card too, to be able to prevent yourself from dying to the combo. Control Warrior is a lot better spot. It's still not a favored matchup, but looking a lot better than it once did.
Yeah, I just have to echo how really good Bash is. It's not super amazing, but what it does is you have all these times when you're Control Warrior and you don't draw Fire War Axe. Well, Bash is kind of like your safety. If you don't draw Fire War Axe, you can sometimes use the Bash to get you back into the game. And it's especially important for two specific cards. They're Nasus Aspirant and Knife Juggler. If you don't really draw Fire War Axe against those two cards, you might as well just give up the game. But Bash kind of gives you a safety net.
Yeah, definitely. Eloise having a really weak hand right now. So one of the tech cards that she put into her deck, tech quote unquote, right, is that Sylvanas, and she put it in there in place of an Azure Drake. Just looking at her list, she has one Azure Drake, and that's kind of the reason why you put those Azure Drakes in, right? Especially if you're running two Darnassus. I didn't catch whether she was running two Darnassus, but typically your deck can be a little bit weak. A little too many, lower cost minions, so that Azure Jet can help you refill your hand, excuse me. Whereas something like the Sylvanas, it can contest the board and be really annoying for the warrior, but that's all it's really gonna do. Beyond that, it's not gonna draw any cards for her. So she really needs something like an Ancient of Lore. Though she does pick up her one and only Azure Drake.
She also picks up a really nice shade to go along with that. Unfortunately for her, Fuoliver has kind of a good answer for that in Sylvanas. A lot of warrior decks have been cutting Sylvanas recently. It's kind of it would be unheard of back in the day, but now a lot of warriors are tending towards this like fatigue-ish style where you just add tons of removal, including the two bash, including things like perhaps even Gorehowl or other big threats like Ysera. Sometimes Sylvanas just isn't as reliable with so many silences in the metagame.
Yeah, absolutely. Just putting a Sylvanas out there, especially against things like Reno Warlock, where they have they almost certainly have silences, stuff like that. It can be really annoying to just have your Sylvanas turn into only a 5/5 out there on the board. But in situations like this, it's pretty good. Eloise most likely will have to trade both of her minions into the Sylvanas because she's not close enough to lethal for her opponent in order to just ignore it and go face. A lot of times when you see Sylvanas, it's like, well, I guess this is my cue to start hitting the face, right? Because I don't really want to deal with this, but not close at all to lethal for Eloise, so she's forced to just trade both in. I think her only decision there was whether or not to play Sylvanas or Loatheb.
Right, and this is looking to be one of those games where the control where just stabilizes way too much. the your health and your armor is generally a really huge resource that you can use, and now Fuoliver has that resource in spades, especially with a shield maiden even having 14 armor, effectively 42 health going into turn 8.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy to look at, right? Because typically the druid just has all these scary things in their hand, whether it be big solid minions that Control Warrior has a hard time dealing with, or those combo pieces that put them on the brink of winning the game. But in this case, the damage coming out from the druid is not as scary as the all the armor options that you see in Fuoliver's hand right now. It's kind of insane.
Yeah, the way Druid really wins this matchup is it keeps putting on pressure every single turn, and it forces the warrior to remove all these minions and effectively. And one card I think the key card in this matchup is actually Ancient of Lore because that allows you to keep putting on the pressure and draw into your combo more quickly. Without that card, you can see Eloise is running very low on fumes.
Yeah, without that card, I don't think Druid is a very good class in general. Just because that card is so good in so many matchups, especially against Control. You get to refill your hand, put a big guy on the board, and draw a couple of cards. One of the quote-unquote broken cards, right? Every class needs a broken card in order to survive in the crazy competitive world of today's Hearthstone, and that's Druid's version. Eloise going a little bit desperate here, needs to have that damage, so she coin innervates out the Druid of the Claw, hits the face, and starting to put a dent in Fuoliver's armor. Let's see how he responds.
Nice play I see here is just
Just Grom.
revenge. Well, Grom too, but revenge, execute, and then okay, this also works. I was gonna say revenge, execute, and then just the Sledge Belcher.
Yeah,
This
so pretty similar
this uses
play,
her
right?
bash.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this play it makes her less vulnerable to Dr. Boom, which is one of the only cards that can really put Eloise back into the game. And speaking
Right.
of Dr. Boom, here it is.
Right, right. So in the end, for Fuoliver, wise to not use those resources. Feels that Bash. Sometimes Bash can be more important than Execute, but he feels like all he needs to do is mitigate the damage to his face, and he'll probably win. So just wants to keep that Execute for any potential huge minions that could be coming his way. And we see that one of those huge minions is top decked by Eloise right now. She could maybe go for the Sylvanas as well, but it doesn't seem like it would be the best option. One problem is that if you play the Dr. Boom, you're probably just using your hero power to get rid of the first 2/3 or so of that Sledge Belcher, and then the slime can start taking care of your boom bots or the Druid of the Claw. So not the best situation for Eloise still.
Certainly not, especially with this follow up. Although, you know what? Even though Fuoliver seems to be taking control of this game, especially with this next turn, it's quite possible that if Eloise top decks two Ancients of Lore back to back, then it'll definitely help her in the matchup. It'll definitely bring her back into the game. But unfortunately, like you mentioned, she only runs one copy of Azure Drake, and that's yet another card that can bring her back into the game that she doesn't have in her deck.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it sounds crazy to draw the two Ancient of Wars, or excuse me, Ancient of Lores, but that's something that's definitely possible if you draw the first one. So looks like looks like Fuoliver, excuse me, is going to go for this revenge execute play like we thought was going to happen. I have a few questions in the chat about who the casters are. It is D2 and Monk casting right now. And again, thanks to Temple Storm for allowing us to use their channel to be able to cast this game. Obviously big thanks to them overall. But Eloise, having no other option, needs to play out this Sylvanas in order to, just get something on the board. Doesn't want to use that BGH with so many targets in Control Warrior. So maybe she can start making something happen now.
Yet another weapon draw from Fuoliver. So this is again like the scenario where even though the Druid's running a bit dry, the problem is the Warrior still has a lot of clunky draws in his deck. You can always get Ysera on his next draw and win the game, but you might as well. It's also possible that you get another Death Spite, and you don't really have any minions to develop onto the board. Warrior, it can get these leads, but it has a hard time closing off the game. It's not like it runs so many big threats, so many big minions in its deck.
Yeah, exactly. And so, we were talking about how Fuoliver looked like he was taking control of the game, but it's starting to seem more and more like it's going to be a top deck war, whether at least Eloise can find those Ancient Lores, or whether Fuoliver can find something like either Justicar or, Alex or the Ysera, excuse me. Although we do see the Alexstrasza come into the hand, kind of distracting me for a second there. But yeah, that is something to finish out the game. We were talking about how Fuoliver might have a hard time, but that is a card to help him out. Though Nat Pagel is a pretty good card for Eloise to get off of that pile of cheddar.
Well, we spoke too soon. Nat Piggle doesn't catch a fish, and unfortunately, Eloise top decks pretty poorly here. What this does do is that it's gonna give two targets for Fuoliver to deal with the next turn, and I guess he'll have to play the Grom, which is it's okay, I guess.
Um, I don't know. I feel like if Eloise plays the Darnassus here, I think Fuoliver might just ignore the Darnassus because he's not going to die to combo, and then just Alexstrasza face and kill the Nat Pagel, I believe.
Yeah, that works as well.
I think you just kind of use priorities, right? You're not going to die to this Darnassus. It doesn't really matter. It's not a threat
Yeah,
anymore because obviously they're not getting armor. So
I think even the Nat Pagel might be more threatening than the Darnassus
yeah,
Aspirant at this
exactly.
point.
But looks like he is considering both of them a threat, so he's going to go ahead and get rid of them both. Eloise does have the ability to get rid of this Grom, but it involves taking 3 damage and using 5 mana instead of the standard 3. So we will see if she comes into a dilemma if she top decks something good. Nope, Savage Roar is not a good card, so probably going to be just spending this turn dealing with the Grom, and that's it, I think. So, yeah. For Oliver, again with the initiative, I'm going to be able to not only kill off this big game hunter, but also put a huge amount of pressure onto the face of Eloise here. 8 damage likely coming. Though he's going to sit back and just kind of take his time and think about his play. He does have the shield slam if he doesn't want to be taking any damage. It's not like he would be in trouble of dying to any sort of combo. Eloise, even top decking a card, will only have 3, so there's no double combo coming. But, yeah, what do you think here? I mean, he could just hit the face with the axe just to get that extra damage, if he so chooses.
I think he's thinking that if I go for the Fire War Axe and kill the Big Game Hunter this turn, I won't have any armor to work with on the following turn. So at best, I'm probably only gonna get 2 damage in, or 2 damage with the shield slam in, no matter what. Fuoliver also has to consider how many shield blocks he runs in his deck, how many shield maidens he runs in his deck, and if he runs just a card. Those are definitely considerations, and whether shield slam will get even more value in the next few turns.
Wow, so yeah, that ancient lore is so late. Eloise is gonna have to use combo in order to clear this. Do you think she uses her face to clear the acolyte just so she can get extra damage to face?
Yeah, I kind of like that actually.
Yeah, it looks like she is going for that.
Your health actually isn't that valuable since you've already seen Grom and you've already seen Alexstrasza. There's no really big combo finishers that Warrior can get. Ooh,
Wow.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
that's a card.
Yeah, maybe she should have gone all face, right? Just to deny the card altogether, because Control Warrior doesn't have the ability to do that. I mean, obviously, it's easy for us to see, and hindsight is also 2020 with that Doctor Boom hitting the field, but could have been an option for her to not hit the Acolyte at all. But in any case, it's going to be this Doctor Boom putting a lot of
Yeah.
pressure on.
The problem with not hitting the card at all is that you're gonna play another card eventually, and that's gonna activate it unless you draw a keeper in the very next turn.
Yeah.
And then the acolyte can then be an activator for the next execute, for example.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, in the end, probably wiser to just kill it right then and there, but did end up hurting her in this case. And there's the keeper, speaking of which. So Fuoliver looks like he's 1 damage off lethal. He could maybe shield slam his own boombot. Oh, 2 damage off lethal, no. But yeah, he could shield slam his own boombot potentially to try to go for some sort of what would that be? Not 50. It would be oh god, I can't do math on stream. So it'd be 50-50 hits to the face, obviously. It looks like he's going to go for just... Oh, well,
Oh.
not a bad not a bad result. I mean, he just kills it off straight away. Probably just plays a Sludge Belcher to kind of finish out the game. But I mean, other than getting lethal, that was pretty good.
Yeah, I would say so indeed. Doing 4 damage to an Ancient of Lore, I'd say that's considered that counts as a pretty good boom bot. And now we see Eloise has a Mounted Raptor in her deck, so she seems to be adopting the philosophy of running multiple 3-drops, which is quite interesting. I remember back in TGT, there was this trend to not run any 3-drops, instead to go for all 4 drops, because you curved out better into a 4-drop with the Darnassus Aspirant. But now she's going back to the philosophy that Mounted Raptor and Shade are both good in this deck. Eloise, unfortunately, she loses the second game as well, and now it's going to be all down to Fuoliver's Freeze Mage. Now, Druid is a good matchup against Freeze Mage, but she'll have so many decks that to go through with against the Freeze Mage.
Yeah, definitely. She needs to win with all three of those classes. So one thing that's interesting is that obviously she's running multiple three drops. It could be the case that she just thinks that all those three drops are just very good. There's not many four drops that are that good, like Savage Combatant. But it kind of begs the question why she isn't running the second Azure Drake, because I feel like that would help quite a bit as far as refilling her hand after she puts those small minions on the field. But I
Yeah.
mean, Sylvanas is a pretty powerful card. Maybe she was teching it for the players that she knew was going to be in her group. In any case, this is finally going to be a pretty favored matchup for the Druid. Although the last one was kind of, but maybe this one is a bit more so, considering how well the Control Warrior has done against Druid lately.
Yeah, keep in mind that it's not only the matches that matter, but also the individual games that matter. So even if Eloise wins one game in her match, she prefers that to getting 0-3'd. In the end, it's going to be match wins that count, then game wins, then heads up, and then the number of games won in the group, and then a coin flip. But it probably won't come down to that.
Yeah, it usually doesn't come down to the coin flip. We saw yesterday. You remember, Life Coach and Firebat were in a huge battle, and Firebat was actually up 2-0, and it was one of the most crazy aggro shaman games you've ever seen. So much trading back and forth, and Life Coach barely won that. And then after that, he won Game 4 as well. Ended up losing the series in the end, 3 games to 2. But without those two wins, he would have been eliminated. So every single game matters. Even if Eloise loses this series, she needs every single game because that could make the difference between her advancing or not.
You conveniently left out the part where Firebat top decked a Crackle, and he had a 50-50 to win if the Crackle rolled 5 or 6, but if it rolled 3 or 4, he would have lost.
Yeah, but I think in the end, if Firebat lost, his game differential would have pushed him through regardless. And in fact, he would have finished 2-1 considering the rest of his results. So in the grand scheme of things, I don't think that Crackle actually mattered, strange as it sounds. Anyway, the Tempo BGH coming out for Eloise. Pretty solid play there. Obviously, you can use it for Alex Straza later on, but I think it's just so much more valuable here to have the damage already on the field. You can kind of deal with Alex Straza later. Typically, a lot of times you see people clear the Alex Straza with combo anyway, kind of clear the Alex Straza while popping the block at the same time. So no real need to hold on to that BGH for dear life for the eventual Alex Straza. You kind of want to kill your opponent before that anyway.
Yeah, and it's also not absurd to think that perhaps there's no Alex Straza in this Freeze Mage deck. We saw yesterday, Firebat, he ran a Freeze Mage that had double Colite Oracle, double Novice Engineer, I believe double Loot Hoarder as well, and it was just a cycle Freeze Mage, and 2 Forgotten Torches as well. So basically his strategy was just to completely burn the opponent down without Alex Straza altogether.
Yeah, that was an insane deck. We didn't really catch it because when we were looking at his decks, we looked at it like, okay, that's a freeze mage. That's all we need to know. And then we didn't actually look in depth at the cards. And by the end of the game, we're like, wait a second, there's no Alex Straza or Antonice in this deck. And then he just started throwing roaring torches at the face, like, oh. I guess that works. So it ended up working out really well for him, but that was a really cool innovation. Not sure if he came up with that or if he got it from someone else, but it was really cool to see.
Right. We were watching that game and we got down to the last 2 cards. And the entire game we were like, okay, this is what happens when he draws Antonidas. This is what happens when he draws the Alex Straza. But he got down to 2 cards left in his deck and he had drawn neither of those cards. And he was still missing a few cards that should have been in his deck. So we were like, what? And then in his interview he revealed he definitely did not have Alex Straza.
Yeah, I mean, by that point we kind of figured it out because he had like 1 card left, right? But it was so insane seeing that, and he kind of said it like matter of factly, like, "Oh yeah, I didn't bring this card." It's like, yeah, we were wondering that entire time. But yeah, Fuoliver, I mean, Eloise putting on the pressure, getting a decent amount of damage here. But Fuoliver does have an answer to this. He can just coin Flame Strike and run his Mad Scientist in, and I mean, this is one of the better Flame Strikes you're ever gonna get as Freeze Mage versus Druid.
Yeah, I would definitely go for a much more defensive approach here. He had the option to go for Emperor. He also last turn, and he also has the option to go for it this turn, but I believe he was setting up for just this Flame Strike right here.
Yeah, absolutely. In case you guys are wondering, some people kind of stumbling into this channel, we explained at the beginning, but these players have to use all 9 classes throughout the day. So if you see some strange classes by either player, that's the reason. After this, Eloise can no longer use Druid, Rogue, or Warlock, for instance, for the rest of the tournament. And or sorry, for the rest of this group as she plays the other players in this group. It's a really cool format, and if you're wondering why there's no Secret Paladin, that's the reason why.
Oh, it's not like every single lineup has to have Secret Paladin, right?
I mean, it's just something that people favor, right?
That's
But
pretty typical.
yeah, so that would be the reason they have to play all 9 classes throughout the day. Really cool. You're gonna see all 9 classes, unless somehow players just lose before they get the shaman out. But there's gonna be a winner, of each of these games. So it would be really strange to not see a class somehow. In any case, Eloise has a bit of a decision here. Looks like she's going to trade for the Mad Scientist rather than go face here. Gonna play the Dr. Boom as well. And looks like this is a Reno mage. I think you pointed that out earlier, excuse me. But yeah, Fuoliver with a decision here. No Frost Nova to use, so I mean, what would you do here?
So this secret is definitely ice barrier, and so you have effectively 30 health. You can survive. Well, actually, I'm not sure if you can survive Force of Nature Savage Roar, but you would have to have an innervate with that. I
Yeah,
think
Force
other
Nature,
options are too defensive, basically.
Force Nature Savage Roar would be 29 damage, because the boom is 23, and then plus the 6. But so he would be alive. However, he does want to kind of be a little bit careful. There are 2 innervates in Eloise's hand. It would be kind of strange for her to have any sort of combo at this moment, though she is kind of close, to be fair. Eloise not liking her odds too much. Actually, how much damage is the double roar here? It's quite a lot.
So each war would be 8 damage, 16 plus 9. That's 25, 26 damage.
Okay, so it looks like she is just testing to see what it is, and doesn't have the requisite damage to kill her opponent, but she can just take out this Thaurissan relatively painlessly. Can either use her face or her boom bots. What would you do here?
So the face damage doesn't really matter too much, but the problem with using face is that you can't innervate out a piloted shredder afterwards. So just because of that, I favor
Actually,
going
I think you can
with
if
the
you use
boom
double
bot.
innervate.
Oh well, yeah, double innervate. Yeah, sure.
And I mean, there's no reason to keep an innervate right now, I don't think. So, um, yeah, Fuoliver, I mean, this is actually a really interesting game because Eloise is pretty all in, and Fuoliver now has the ability to potentially play Reno if he gets the requisite cards. What cards have we seen so far that could be duplicates? I think we've already seen all the secrets, so that's not an issue. I believe maybe an Ice Lance.
Yeah, usually players run double Ice Lance no matter what. I don't believe we've seen a Frost Nova yet, and that's usually a double as well.
Yeah, they were talking about the Frost Nova earlier, so I believe that's something that he'd be looking for. So maybe one Ice Lance, one Frost Nova to be able to use that Reno. In the meantime, he does, excuse me, have that Ice block, but only a couple to save him for a couple more turns. Might be a bit difficult to stay alive here.
Yeah, Frostbolt is another something to consider as well.
The funny thing
Ooh,
is he
one
doesn't.
damage.
I mean, he's using this Roaring Torch right now, but I don't know. I don't know if he wants to use it. Oh, that's the Roaring Torch. Sorry, I thought that was Forgotten Torch for a second. So if it was Forgotten Torch, you wouldn't want to use it because it makes it less likely that you're going to draw your other cards. But I guess Roaring Torch is okay to use just to weaken up that Doctor Boom a bit. This game is kind of going down to the wire, especially because if Fuoliver can ever activate this Reno, he would be in a decent position.
I think he would be in an amazing position. Eloise is kind of running out of gas. After this Doctor Boom, she doesn't really have anything else to play.
Yeah, definitely. Though a top deck Ancient of Lore maybe could refill her hand, and on the other hand, Fuoliver doesn't have a way to kill Eloise anytime soon, so he could give her a lot of time. But as it stands, we do see that Fuoliver doesn't have a way to activate this Reno. Probably going to need to find an Arcane Intellect just to draw those last 2 cards. in the first place. But yeah, pretty desperate times, and yeah, he's really gonna need to an Arcane Intellect, I believe. I think that's the only card he can really draw, um, or something like that, some sort of card draw, because otherwise he's not gonna have both the Ice Lance and the Frost Nova.
Playing double Doomsayer, so he really doesn't want his opponent to play any cards here. Although the thing is, like, I'm not sure if it matters because no matter what Fuoliver draws, if we assume that he has both a second Ice Lance or two Ice Lances and two Frost Novas remaining in his deck, um, it's gonna be really hard to activate his Reno. Exactly.
All right, so that's going to do it. Eloise finally takes a game with her Druid, kind of showing how Druid has fallen off quite a bit. You know, it used to be one of the strongest classes, if not the strongest, as far as how people view the deck. But at least this mid-range Druid is not doing too well. The aggro Druid doing a decent job in its place in some tournaments, but in the case it's going to be Rogue and Warlock remaining for Eloise, trying to get the win versus Fuoliver's Mage. That does give her 1 point though. That's pretty huge. It's really hard to come back from losing a series 3-0 unless you get that 2-1.
Right, exactly. And we have to point out that Eloise at least has two decks that are favorable against Freeze Mage, and it's certain that she will queue these up first because, again, games matter. Not only do matches matter, games matter. So she obviously thought that the Druid would have the best chance against this Reno Freeze Mage, and she thinks that her Reno Warlock has the second best chance, which makes a lot of sense since Reno Jackson from the Warlock would just completely counteract Alexstrasza, and it would force Fuoliver to basically burn Eloise from 30 HP.
Yeah, although it is kind of a delicate guessing game, right? Because once you get to around 20 HP, 20 is kind of the high end, but if you start getting to the high teens, sometimes if the freeze mage has the requisite damage, they can just burn the warlock down before the warlock has a chance to play that Reno. So it will be kind of a delicate just kind of going back and forth to see Eloise reading the hand of Fuoliver to see maybe if he has that requisite burst damage, and making sure to use Reno at the exact right time.
Right. Not only does Reno Jackson Warlock have the Reno Jackson as a heal, it almost always has the anti-heal bot, and not only that, very oftentimes it has the Earthen Ring Farseer. In addition to that, there's options like Siphon Soul. There's also options like Jiraxis, and even Dark Peddler is a potential heal if it gets the Voodoo Doctor.
Yeah, definitely. Though she might prefer going for something like a Power Overwhelming. We do see she has kind of 3 blinks right here. None of these too good. I imagine she's probably going to go for the Dragonhawk Rider rather than the Reliquary Seeker, just because... or it's not Dragonhawk Rider, the Young Dragonhawk, excuse me, in order to get that. But it looks like she's going to go for the Dream, going to go for that potential 5/5 on the end of her board. Not too likely unless she gets, an interesting... implosion at some point, but I mean, typically the young Dragonhawk doesn't really get its win free off too many times anyway, so don't blame her too much for going for the Dream.
Yeah, I like it. It shows that she has balls.
She does indeed have those balls within she. Like, so this is a good spot for Eloise. Obviously, you don't want to be playing too defensive. You were talking before about the other heal options in the deck, and a situation where maybe you could go for baiting your opponent into going for a 2-turn lethal. You heal up just out of range, so maybe Fuoliver starts throwing damage spells at the face. And then from there, you kind of go, I have Reno Jackson. But the better option, a lot of times, if you have the opportunity to do so, is to just go for the burn. Just kind of pressure your opponent as soon as possible. And we do see the second brother come into the hand of Eloise. They're brothers, right? I'm not really keen on the lore of Warcraft.
I believe they were both made in a lab.
Okay.
But yeah, you could say that they're brothers.
All right, so...
they're brothers in spirit.
Anyway, so Fugan gets played onto the board, the 4/7, just to have the extra health there. Kind of a response to the fact that Fuoliver pinged the Inking Boss to get it down to 1 health, despite giving Eloise 1 more power onto the board in the process. So Eloise definitely responding to that, putting the more healthy minion onto the board. And this Thaddeus could do a lot of work in this game, potentially, if it comes out.
Not just one Thaddeus, but there's an interesting interaction between Fugan, Thaddeus, and Freeze Mage. and it's that if you clear both Fugen and Stalag on the same turn, then two Thaddiuses will actually spawn.
Right, that's an interesting interaction that a lot of people don't know. But yeah, interesting situation for Eloise. She actually can. She actually has the dream. The reliquary seeker. If I can speak English right now, will be potentially a 5/5 right here if she goes for it. But doesn't go for the dream, unfortunately. Dang it. So
Yeah.
sad. But yeah, it does put a lot of pressure onto the board. Flame Strike will clear everything but a 1/1, I believe, using the Frostbolt as well. But no, but then the Thaddeus comes. Uh oh.
Well,
Well,
yeah. The nice thing about that
this is
is then
awkward.
only one Thaddeus comes.
Yeah, so you don't want to Frostbolt first. That would be a mistake here. But regardless, Thaddeus is obviously pretty threatening. Would pop the block the next turn. So really tough situation for Fuoliver. And Eloise finding herself in a really good spot here. This is kind of the power of the Reno Jackson luck, right? Sometimes you just have these, disparate options that this disparate, sorry, not desperate, to be able to just put so much pressure on your opponent, and cards that you wouldn't normally see are pretty effective sometimes.
Oh yeah, a lot of pressure cards here, especially. The thing is, Reno Jackson Warlock can play off in a lot of different ways, but Eloise just happened to get an extremely aggressive hand, and it's just working out for her against this Freeze Mage. Even if she didn't get this aggressive hand, she also had a lot of defensive options in her deck. So either way, you can see why Reno Jackson Warlock is a good counter to Reno Jackson Freeze Mage.
Yeah, definitely. Partially because the Freeze Mage is looking to burn, whereas the Reno Jackson is kind of fine with just putting things on the board and playing defensive when the time comes. So Eloise is kind of painting herself into a corner as far as this decision to play the Reliquary Seeker is concerned, because she doesn't want to play it because she wants room to have something potentially like an owl, or just to be able to play anything, maybe a Jiraxis to heal. But now she's not making use of its ability, so maybe she'll eventually play it if her opponent can play something for her to trade into. But right now, it's seeming like a strange decision.
Right. It seemed to be the dream, and I think it would have been the dream if she had an option to play it around turns before turn 7 at least. But the problem here now is getting the time when she actually does want to save that space for the Ironbeak Owl or the heal.
Yep. So looking at Fuoliver's hand, looks like he's going to go for the Alexstrasza. He does have a decent amount of damage in his hand, but not all at once, unfortunately for him. Big Game Hunter comes up, but not really needed. In fact, she might want to just get the Thaddeus out right now. I imagine this would be a good spot for Reliquary Seeker as well, because she can start trading in and also pop the block. How much damage does she have? Does she have 19 to kill the Alexstrasza and pop the block without using BGH? I guess not. 11, 14, 18,
Oh,
19, 20, 21. Okay, she does.
yeah.
She does have
She
the
definitely
requisite
does.
damage, just kind of making sure that you kill the Alexstrasza exactly, as well as get your opponent down to as low health as possible. Looks like she's found a way to do that. Not gonna play the Reliquary Secret though, it's making me sad every single time. But, alright. In any case, she is able to clear, or sorry, pop the block. Gonna play the BGH.
Yeah,
Uh,
she was thinking maybe there's a way that this was Ice Barrier, perhaps. I'm not sure when the secret came out. But now she just doesn't have. She just has to cross her fingers and hope that there's no ice block, that there's not enough burn to kill off Eloise, and she does win that bet, I believe.
Reno doesn't go off here, right? We haven't seen a single Frost Nova. I think. No, have we? We've seen Blizzard.
But yeah, we've seen Blizzard, not Frost Nova yet. Although because Fuoliver hasn't drawn it in either of the two games, it's possible that Reno Jackson could go off. But even if Reno Jackson did go off, let's count the damage in hand right now. Or on the board, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 13 damage plus 11. So there's 24 damage on board and then 3 from hand. So if Fuoliver had his Reno Jackson activated, he would actually survive right now.
Yeah, he would survive. but he's looking at his deck. Maybe he's having a hard time remembering what he's used, though I kind of find that hard to believe. And so yeah, he realizes that he doesn't have the cards in hand to be able to do the Reno Jackson. Oh, sorry, he hasn't drawn the cards to be able to use Reno Jackson, and that's going to be a win for Eloise with her Reno Jackson. Or sorry, yeah, with the Reno Jackson Warlock. It's going to tie the series up 2-2, and we're going to be going to Rogue versus Mage. Now, after 2 favorable matches for Eloise, is going to be not so favored at all. Obviously, we haven't been able to see Reno Jackson heal for Fuoliver, but if it does go off, then it's really hard for the Rogue to win this matchup because of the limit damage that it has in the deck.
Right, so this is going to be Eloise's last deck, and it's going to be the only deck in our lineup that most people consider unfavored against Freeze Mage. What Eloise really has to do to win this matchup is just to keep pressuring the Freeze Mage with minions every single turn. So Earthring Farseer, it shouldn't be really used to heal. It should be used just as a 3/3 to pressure out the opponent. And hopefully with that, Eloise can, exactly like we said, pressure Fuoliver out of this game. The chances that she wins this game are definitely rise if she has certain specific tech cards in this deck, like Edwin is a very good card. Assassin Blade is also an amazing card against Freeze Mage because it can output so much damage, a minimum of 12 damage in fact.
Yeah, definitely. So she's going to want to be getting those guys on the field and potentially buff them up with something like Tinkers. And that's basically, I mean, this matchup wasn't the worst before Reno Jackson, just because people kind of underestimate how much burst that the Rogue could do. It felt like the Freeze Mage could kind of run them out of damage, and or kind of get the burst from themselves to be able to kill the Rogue. But just so much burst coming out of the Rogue that it's definitely possible for them to kill the Mage before they're able to react. But ever since Reno's come out, it's been so much more difficult. And we'll see if Fuoliver gets the cards to be able to activate it this game.
Right. Again, we still don't know if he has 2 Frost Novas in his deck, but we have to kind of guess that this is probably the case. Do you remember if any Mad Scientists were played in the last game as well?
Yeah, there was. Remember,
Okay.
he used the frost, or see the flame strike, and then attacked the face when there's. Or that was 2 games ago. Sorry, when he attacked the face with the mad scientist instead of killing the 5/1 Sylvanas. We do see a Kona Cold. It's probably a one of. Pretty hard to fit 2 of those in the deck while not playing other cards. So. This could be the play here. He can do this into Blizzard, into Flame Strike, so can lock down the Rogue for a while, but we will see how the game pans out after that. Eloise picks up Lotheb, which would be kind of reasonable here, though the kind of ideal turn is right before the Mage's turn 7, so that they can't use anything that costs 3 mana, like one of the Secrets or Frost Nova.
Yeah, or just generally you want to use it right before they can kind of KO you, or when you're setting up for lethal. Lotheb is just a really great card. It also forces the opponent to have a Frost Nova because none of the other freezing spells really work out.
Yeah, definitely. And then some of the times where you don't really want to use it are right before turn 6 because they just play the Thorison, and before turn 9 because they just play the Alexstrasza. Though in this matchup, sometimes you need the Alexstrasza to heal yourself, because that's a lot of the times that's how you win the matchup, is to kind of run your opponent out of damage, especially with the Reno in the deck.
Yeah, I would want to say it's a little unfortunate that Eloise was kind of forced to play the Lotheb on this turn because it doesn't really accomplish a lot of the things that she wanted to do, like setting up lethal, like playing it defensively in order to prevent lethal from on her side of the board. But unfortunately, she has no other minions to play. Kind of like a, I guess at this point, it's kind of a lackluster hand.
Yeah, I mean, it still will be able to push some damage. It'll be interesting to see if she decides to get rid of this Doomsayer the easy way, using the sap, and then kind of pushing damage to face, or whether she just tries to clear it up on the board. She can go for a lot of damage here using that Deadly Poison, Tinkers, and Sap to push damage to face and kind of put the pressure on Fuoliver, though he does have the Flame Strike, and he kind of indicated that he had the Flame Strike with that ping last turn.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of a risk here going for that kind of play. And if you do go for that kind of play, you know you're giving your opponent kind of more resources. Um, I guess the middle of the ground play would be to use the Tinker's Sharpsword Oil and use one of the minions to kill off this Doomsayer. Oh, or this also works just playing Blade Failure as well. You might
Right,
as well
right.
get that damage in.
Yeah, so
And
perfect damage to kill the Doomsayer. So yeah, that definitely makes sense. You're not going to use Flurry for anything other than hitting the face for a lot, and if you can instantly kill a minion, that's really good as well.
right, and if Fuoliver locks all his mana up into this Flame Strike, then Eloise threatens an Eviscerate kill, and even if she doesn't have Eviscerate, she threatens a Sprint into Preparation Eviscerate kill.
Yeah, definitely. So Eloise here, she has an option either of drawing a lot of cards, but having very little mana afterward, borrowing some sort of prep, or using the fan to combine with her deadly poison. If she picks up something like SI, she won't have the mana to do so, though she could pick up something like the Eviscerate, like you mentioned.
So,
Um,
so she has an option. She can fan and hope for an Eviscerate, or sprint and hope for prep Eviscerate. I'm not sure which one is more likely, but this sprint definitely, if you don't draw any of those cards, it definitely puts you in a better position on the next turn.
Yeah, definitely. So, having not picked up anything, it ended up working out okay. Although she could have played the Vile Teacher maybe to put pressure on her opponent. More card draw for Fuoliver here is good for him to be able to kind of thin out that deck and potentially play Reno. I still know Frost Nova, so that's the card that's eluded him for 3 games straight now. I assume that's what he's been looking for, and he's got to be maybe tilting a bit at this point. No Frost Nova for 3 games? I mean, God.
Yeah. Maybe he just forgot to put it in his deck and he could have used Rita Jackson all along.
Yeah, he's like, wait a second. I could have just wait. What did I put in this deck again? Uh,
Yeah, you laugh, but there have been players who've experienced this before. Like I remember Powder at Assembly, he was after a series where he kept playing the same Zoo deck and he never drew into Void Caller. He began questioning whether he even put that in his deck.
yeah, that can happen, but you really need to be on top of what's in your deck if you're going to be playing a Reno deck that has duplicates of certain cards. But yeah, it looks like Eloise can pop the block here with Deadly Poison, Blade Flurry. It does have enough mana to play the Vile Teacher and go for that. Really risky if his opponent, or sorry, if her opponent has the uh, the Reno Jackson here, but that's a risk that she really has to take. She can't really be waiting. The longer she waits, the more likely that it is that her opponent can use the Reno. And keep in mind, she doesn't know that there's Reno in this deck. Fuoliver hasn't shown it yet.
Yeah, and there's not really like
Oh,
cards. Oh, that's so key.
is that is that it? Is that the last card?
Do you remember if there's a mad scientist in this game? That's the card I'm
Oh,
unsure
right,
of.
right, right. I don't think so. I think we've seen all this. We've seen the secrets, but not the mad scientist.
Right. So the duplicates in Freeze Mage or Reno Freeze Mage usually are the um, the Frost Novas, the Doomsayers, Ice Block, Ice Barrier, and Mad Scientist, Frost Nova, and Frostbolt, Ice Lance. And I think we've seen all those cards, at least one copy of each, except for that key Mad Scientist.
Yeah, definitely. So that's probably what Fuoliver is looking for. Probably has to use this anyway now, regardless. Needs to just okay. He's gonna go for just hope that the opponent can't pop his block this turn, and maybe that'll give him 2 turns to be able to kind of escape out of this. Uses the Ice Lance pretty quickly there, rather than going for something like Frostbolt. What do you think about that? Maybe he values the damage of the Frostbolt to kind of kill something off.
Yeah, I guess it's just a more versatile card. Not only that, but the way that Freeze Mage, a lot of times it wins against Rogue is it kind of fatigues them out, it just runs them out of resources. So Frostbolt, if he's going for that kind of plan, Frostbolt is definitely more valuable to him.
Yeah. So Eloise here, if she sprints, she overdraws, but she can backstab her 1/1 first, and then she would not overdraw. Yeah, she would not overdraw if she backstab her 1/1 first and then went for the sprint. So that could be something she goes for. She hasn't seen any. Yeah, it looks like she's going to go for that play. Pretty heads up by her to be able to spot that. So she's going to get rid of her 1/1. Doesn't really matter this turn. She just doesn't want to overdraw anything. and gonna see if she can pick up an Eviscerate, which would pop the block and put her in a really good spot.
Well, there's the prep, and wow, no eviscerate still.
Wow, pretty unfortunate for her
Sh
not to be able to pick
yeah,
up to this point.
she's gonna prep the fan, and let's see if we see it. Oh, there it is, eviscerate.
So guess the Eviscerates in the last card after double sprint plus the with the double sprint plus the Fen, and she wanted that to be Ice Barrier, obviously, to win the game right there, but not the case. Fuoliver, his only option here now is to just Alexstrasza his face. He's not facing lethal on board. How much is that? That's 9 damage on board. So technically he could potentially still stay alive, and really that's only his only option right now.
Yeah, he's kind of worried about Tinker Sharpsword Oil though, since there's no more space left on the board. So it's like guaranteed for the oil, if Eloise has the second oil, to come on one of these minions, and I believe that would be lethal.
Yeah, so Eloise picks up the BGH. Interesting to see if she tries to go for some sort of lethal using the oil. I mean, she could.
Well, there's no oil in her hand right now.
Yeah, I mean, to pick up oil with maybe the Azure Drake or something. But that would not be enough mana, and it wouldn't be lethal anyway. No, it would be lethal. If somehow she could maybe, get the damage in, but she has to sacrifice the 1/1 anyway, so I don't think it's possible. Looks like she might just kind of push damage to face and just BGH this.
Oh.
Getting rid of 2 minions here. And looks like she values that Shredder being really sticky just for the repetitive damage. Doesn't want a 1/1 on the board, wants to get that 4 damage in potentially, especially because she's seen a lot of AoE. And again, since this is Reno Freeze Mage, it's not likely to run that much AoE, other than the double Frost Nova. So there's Thorson, that's obviously a 1-of, which means Fuoliver. Maybe just play the Reno and hope that you made a mistake. That's basically his only option right now. I don't see anything else. He can't draw any cards. So
Yeah, did you catch how many cards he has left in his deck?
it's a lot. I think it's double digits.
Nope.
Nope. Yep, he didn't make a mistake. He wasn't incorrect. So that's going to be it. Eloise is going to take an unfavored matchup, gonna reverse sweep Fuoliver and take the series 3-2. Definitely congratulations to her. Unfortunate Fuoliver is gonna have to come back from that 0-1 deficit and find a win later on.